First of all, Londrina, it's in two different states in Brazil. There's the state of Sao Paulo, and then there's the state of Paraná. And most of it is in the northeastern part, or northwestern part, sorry, of Paraná. And then there's a little bit in the southern part of Sao Paulo that it gets. So there's four cities in Sao Paulo. It's Bauru, Marília, Tupã, and Presidente Prudente. I honestly did not have the opportunity to serve in the São Paulo part. I stayed in only in Paraná, which is where Londrina, Maringá, Apucarana, Cascavel, and Foz do Iguaçu are. And there's also a new city that was supposed to be, that the missionaries were going to be entering after I left my mission in Paraná. So most of the time when you think of Brazil, you think of people that are really, really poor. You will see in this part of the country, there's definitely poor people, but there's not as many, and it's not as bad as you probably are imagining. It is known to be one of the wealthiest parts of South America. I'd say the middle class is definitely stronger there than other parts of Brazil, and you'll see that a lot of people have a nice house of 2 or 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen. In this part of Brazil, most people have 1, maybe 2 small cars, and then 1 or 2 nice televisions. So I mean, they're definitely not at the same standard as we are here in the United States, but they definitely aren't a third world country, that's for sure. Church history in the area. So Londrina was the capital of Paraná is Curitiba, which is where the closest temple is, and Londrina actually has had members longer than Curitiba by just a few years. Part of the reason Curitiba has so many members is because it's about 3 or 4 times the size of Londrina. Londrina right now, the actual city of Londrina, has 2 stakes, and they're working on a 3rd one. Inside the mission, there's 2 more stakes inside of Paraná. They're looking at dividing to 4 more stakes. And then there's 1 district that will soon be a stake also in Paraná. So that'll make 3, 7, 8 stakes inside of Paraná in the next few years. And then in São Paulo, they have 2 districts and 2 stakes. One of the stakes actually recently started getting super active in missionary work, Bauru. They are doing very well there. Not only are they baptizing a lot, but they're retaining a lot of members, which you'll find out in the missionary work is very difficult, especially in Brazil. And so they actually now have a goal to divide into 2 stakes here in a few years. And then Tupã and Presidente Prudente, they are going to become a stake before too long. Neat facts is that Londrina, in terms of family history work, is actually leading Brazil right now. They index more than any other mission, and I believe it's this Maringá stake that they index more than any other stake in Brazil. But what's interesting is that the ward that does the most indexing is actually in the Londrina stake. So that's pretty cool that the mission does so well in family history work. They're very active in that. Also, they've been known to have a lot of general authorities in the past. Not so much recently that Brazil's grown so much that they have so many members and it's hard for general authorities to get to all the places. But 20, 30 years ago, Londrina would be at the top of the list for all the general authorities such as apostles and prophets to pass through when they were going through Brazil. So when you get the chance to talk to members, especially those old members that have been in the church for a while, they'll tell you about the experiences that they had to have to make lunch or to even eat lunch with some of the apostles and prophets that have gone through Brazil. So it's pretty cool. For attendance, I would have to say that your branches, so Apucarana, which is almost a stake right now, their branch attendance has been going up. You'll see that the ward attendance or branch attendance will be a little bit different than here in the States. On average, a branch will have anywhere from 50 to 100, 120 people in it. It just depends on the branch, and also kind of what part of the year it is too. Can depend on a lot of that. Your wards, you will see anywhere from 80 to 200 people. So like your small wards will be around 90, 100 people. 80 is like the minimum. And then you'll see also wards that are close to 200. So actually when I was in Londrina, I was in one area where when I first got there, the attendance was probably about 75. And then just because of baptisms and also new people moving in and people being reactivated in that period, I was able to see When I left, it was about 95 to 100, but it was about 120 when I left Londrina to go to my next area. So that was cool. But so that first area, it started off at about 75. The next area I went to, it started off at about 150, and it was a fairly strong, very active ward. And so it just depends on, from ward to ward, what the attendance would be. But if it's very rare that you'll see probably more than 180 in a ward, because at about 200 they'll probably split it. And in a ward, it's very, very rare that it'll be lower than 90 or 80 without it being, turned back into a branch. Brazil being what used to be a colony of the Portuguese, and the Portuguese were Roman Catholics. So you'll see a lot of people just that are traditionally Roman Catholic, and most of the time they won't even go to church. It's just part of their identity. It's kind of strange. Here in the States, we really don't see that when people usually say that they're such and such religion. It's because they actually go a few times a year, or every Sunday, or just whatever. But they're somewhat active in that religion. Otherwise, they'll just say, "Oh, I'm a Christian," or something general, right? Well, in Brazil, it's a little bit different with when they use the word Catholic. Catholic could mean anything to they go every Sunday and go to all the activities and social gatherings during the week, to they haven't gone to church in the last 40 years. It could mean any of those things. So usually when somebody says they're Catholic, you're going to have to ask more questions about how active they are and everything about that. And usually it's just tradition for them. They were baptized as a baby in the Catholic Church, and that's what it is. But you'll notice that there's also a strong, what they call Evangelical Presence, and that is a big movement that's happening. You're seeing a lot of Roman Catholics leaving the Catholic Church in Brazil and going to these evangelical churches. It's actually, if I'm not mistaken, the fastest declining country for Roman Catholics right now in the world. A few years ago, you would see, I think it was about 10 or 15 years ago, you saw like a 90 to 95% consider themselves Roman Catholic. Today it's about 70 to 75. So there's been a huge decrease in that sense. And these evangelicals, most of them are Pentecostal churches, meaning that they believe in the gift of tongues, in the sense that they believe you just, I guess, kind of say whatever comes into your head. It doesn't even make sense. It could just be anything, and that's what they believe in. They believe that miracles happen today and stuff like that. And a lot of it is kind of, the pastors unfortunately use it for show to get money from the people, right? And so you'll see a lot of Pentecostal churches. A big church you'll see is Assembleia de Deus, which is the Assembly of God church, but it's a little bit different than our Assembly of God here. They are very, very against the church. They actually make books and things like that against the church. So you will want to be prepared for that. If anybody whips out the book, my suggestion, just tell them that you're not there to do a Bible bash, that you just want to share a message, and if they don't want that, I would leave, because it's just not going to be suitable to teach with the Spirit there. Another one is Congregação Cristã, which would be the Christian Congregation of Brazil. Sorry, so I didn't say the whole name. It's Congregação Cristã do Brasil. So this church was actually originally founded by Americans in Brazil, and it's actually worldwide now, but where it's strongest is in Brazil, especially in the part of Brazil you're going to be in the south. This church, if you get somebody to get baptized from this church, I promise you they will be an awesome member. This church actually prepares people to be really good Latter-day Saints. The problem is trying to get them to understand the doctrines of the gospel of Jesus Christ in their entirety, and to actually want to pray and leave the church that they've been attending for who knows how long. Again, it's another church with a lot of tradition, but unlike the Catholic Church, they are very good about keeping their youth active in the church by giving their youth a lot of opportunities to participate. They have an orchestra there, they have a choir, they have a lot of other activities that they do to involve the youth. With that church, again, sometimes they try to do Bible bash, but if you find somebody from that church that actually is interested, it might take them a little bit longer than some of your other investigators. There are some investigators that within 2 weeks are ready to be baptized, but I've noticed with members from the Christian congregation, usually it takes about a month to 5 weeks for them to be ready and to want to be baptized. And it's nothing to do with the commandments. It's just that they're afraid because once they leave that church, they're going to get kind of attacked by the people that used to be their friends within the church. I had the experience that I actually didn't do the baptism. I did the baptismal interviews for this one family. It was an amazing family. And the best part is after I did the interviews, I was then transferred to the area where they live. They're just amazing. But after they were baptized, they did receive a lot of aggression, basically, from the church that they used to go to, the Christian congregation. So realize that it is hard for them to leave that church. Another church that you've heard of, Jehovah's Witness, is very strong in Brazil also. In fact, oftentimes on Sunday morning, you will see them probably just annihilating the neighborhood where you have been working all week. And they'll just go door to door to door. Many times I've seen them in the streets, and it's kind of awkward, to be honest. Usually, us as missionaries, we try to be nice and we say hi, and they'll just look at us kind of weird and kind of say hi back, but not really say hi to us. Some of them are nice. There are a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses that are nice, and then some of them are aggressive and mean, so be careful. One time, a companion and I did get invited into a house. We didn't know at the time that they were Jehovah's Witnesses. They looked like people that were sincerely interested, and they just wanted to basically try to destroy our faith, so we ended up leaving that situation. It wasn't very fun. I hope you get the chance to live, or at least be a companion, or at least live in the same house as a Brazilian who hasn't been a member his whole life, because he will tell you some of the funniest things that he thought about the church before. One thing that I heard was that supposedly in Brazil, the church sacrifices babies and then we eat their flesh, was one that I heard. They think that the church is only for rich people, which kind of makes sense because a lot of the members of the church strives so much for people to have self-sufficiency, right? And so with that, a lot of members, they generally look for the better paying jobs, and they generally get the education to have these jobs, and they'll have their own car, they'll have their own house and things like that. And so it does kind of have that misconception that, it's only for rich people, even though most people don't realize that it's because of the church that they were able to receive those blessings. Another one that I've heard is that it's only for men is another big one. Some people get us confused with other religions too, which you'll see a lot. So like the Christian congregation, they have one side for men and one side for women when they're inside of the church. And a lot of people think that that's what our church does, and so we have to tell them, no, it's not that way. Families sit together, husband and wife by each other with their children, wherever they want to sit inside the chapel. It doesn't really matter. A lot of other churches during the week, they have a lot of activities, and the church does that too, but not as frequently, because a lot of the other churches, they have paid ministry, and our church doesn't, right? So people have to go out and they have to work during the day and during the week. And so some people think that the church is really closed off, and that the people kind of closed off from everyone else, which you kind of get that sense. And even here in the United States, some people mention that too. And so you just have to tell the people when they can participate in the activities, when the activities are, let them know that the church isn't closed off and that it's open for people. It's just because we don't have people there at the church all the time, it can be difficult to have those activities open all the time. Some other difficulties that you'll have when you're teaching investigators. So I'd have to say one is definitely commandments. So, and it kind of depends a little bit too. So with the Christian congregation, like I mentioned, usually they don't have problems with commandments. Even with coffee, a lot of them don't drink coffee because they're against anything that's addictive, and a lot of them realize that coffee can be addictive. Some of them do like coffee, and some of them do drink coffee. It's not really a commandment for them. So with them, usually that's a problem that you'll run into. But other things with that sort of people without religious background, you won't have too many problems. With people inside the Catholic Church, you will see a lot of people that are not legally married because they don't have the money to. You will see a lot of people, and most of the time they've been living together for 20 years. And it can be difficult even when members are like, we'll help them pay for the marriage. It can still be difficult just because they've lived so long not being married, and the idea of them being married now is just difficult for them to grasp. They just don't see what's the reason why they need to. Smoking, I would say, is a very big problem. Even living in a I come from Kansas, right? Even living in a place outside of Utah, I noticed that there were a lot of people smoking, a lot more than I had ever seen in my life. It's a problem that most people get when they're young, and when they're about high school age, they start smoking, and then they just are never able to kick the habit. So that's a hard one. And then also coffee. There in Londrina, actually, that part of the country is one of the largest producing areas of coffee in the world. So when you're going from city to city being transferred, you'll see a lot of coffee crops. And just because of that, coffee is really cheap. A lot of people will drink it, and they actually drink what's different than our coffee, what they consider American coffee, that they consider very weak. And so their coffee is a lot stronger, it's a lot more concentrated. And so they have a lot more problems. But some solutions to that is that also in Brazil they have what's called cevada, which would be barley in English. And basically what it is they take barley, they mash it up, crunch it up, and then they'll fry it, and it'll give off this juice. And this juice you can use, and it's basically a coffee substitute. And it's been approved by general authorities that it is not against the word of wisdom, and it's a great substitute to help people overcome that coffee addiction. Another thing that will be kind of tricky is that the whole tea thing in Brazil is different than it is here. So here we just say tea in general you can't drink, right? Well, in Brazil they don't really have the same tea that we do. Their tea is more herbal tea, and they do have black tea, but most people don't drink it because they don't like it. You'll see a lot of people have tried it, and a lot of people have never even heard of it. So, but it's very rare that you'll actually find somebody who drinks it on a regular basis, so that won't be a problem. Alcohol depends on the person. Some people it's a really big problem. Some people they only do it occasionally. I'd say it's about the same here. Law of chastity, I kind of touched on that when I talked about marriage. Even people that are not living together, usually you have to ask that question, because there are a lot of people that break it because it's just part of their culture says that it's not that big of a deal. It's not a sin. It's not that big of a problem. And so you'll see a lot of people that break it. Even people that go to church every Sunday in other religions, they will break the law of chastity because they don't think that it's a sin. And I would say that with commandments, that's some of the biggest, I guess, roadblocks helping people to baptize. And then I kind of hit some of the other roadblocks earlier about sometimes doctrine can be a problem. Understanding the principles of the gospel and the idea of a restored church. Another big problem is understanding that there's only one true church that can have all the truth in its whole. Many of them think that you can take just whatever path and that they all lead back to heaven, which we know if you truly want to enter into the celestial kingdom in exaltation, there's only one way you can do that. And so that's hard for them to grasp, is that there's only one true church. They believe that all church comes from God.